Hi, this is Mashnu, and here is the analysis of the fifth game in this series of 45 minutes games. I played this one this morning. I was playing white against a player whose nickname is Nick Higgins 69, and it was a King's Indian. This samish variation. I played d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight to c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, f3. That's the samish variation, and this is one of the sharpest variations against the King's Indian defense. The idea of white is to castle queenside and start a kingside attack with g4 or h4 or both, but you don't always get the chance to do that with white. Sometimes black prepares an attack at the queen side so fast that that is preferable to castle kingside and have your king safe. Especially after yesterday's game, when I made this mistake of not thinking about my king safety, and I lost that game, as you probably saw in the previous video. Anyway, right now my opponent played c6, and it's actually funny because this move was made by a player that I met in a blitz tournament. He played this c6 variation, and I replied bishop to e3, just like in that blitz game. And what that player did in this blitz tournament is he played a6, or perhaps castling kingside first and then a6, and after a6 to try to push b5, and thus it's a very interesting variation. It's not very very known, very popular, but it's good to have a look at this. If you are a King's Indian player, have a look at it. It's really a nice variation to play with black. But this time my opponent played castle kingside. I played queen to d2, placing the queen and the bishop directing to h6 and preparing to castle queenside. And here my opponent did not play a6, which is the theoretical line. He played e5 immediately. I found this move in my database, so this is also a theoretical line, but not the main line, let's say, of this variation. I continued as white continues usually, knight g to e2. This is more or less a standard way to react to e5 of black in the same-ish. And now he took on d4. Here, of course, white retakes with the knight, because we want to keep this battery of queen and bishop directing to h6. And here black played a rook to e8. And when I looked in my database after the game, I saw that there is also a variation that goes immediately d5, and that's a move that I didn't consider actually. But it is a move that can be made after c takes d5, follows c takes d5, and now white can play e5, and then things start getting complicated. This pawn looks very strong. The question is whether this pawn on d5 is a strong weapon or perhaps later a weakness. It can be defended well right now. I think black needs to play knight e8 or knight d7. Those are the two moves that I found in my database. Knight d7 is a bit more popular, and then this pawn is attacked, so white plays f4, and then the knight goes from d7 to b6, and you see here this nice square c4 appearing for black. So perhaps it's a good idea for white to finish the development, and at a certain point perhaps playing b3 even to control c4. I don't know, but anyway, this is a nice variation. In the game my opponent played rook to e8, and now he's clearly preparing d5, because now this rook is pinning the bishop on e3, so black can play e5 and then at a certain point remain with the knight on d5 after some retakes, and then attack this e3 bishop twice. So because of this threat, I considered rook d1 and I considered castle queenside. I castled queenside, and I did think about yesterday's game when I did that, in the sense that castling queenside looks a little bit dangerous if black can push the b and the a pawn, but that's not very easy to do for him. So I just trusted that my king would be safe and that my attack would be faster. Here he played d5. I took with the c-pawn, he took back, and now I played a move that I think that my opponent did not expect. I think that he expected me to take on d5 immediately, but what I did is I removed the knight from d4 to c2. My idea is that now this pawn is pinned, so I cannot take here because then the queen falls. And I'm ready to take on d5 either with the pawn or with the knight. I'm actually increasing the tension this way. The knight on c2 can be handy later if I can reroute it to e3 and d5 perhaps, or perhaps to b4 and d5, or perhaps to a3 and c4. There are several possibilities, so I was happy with my position here. Black's pieces are there on the back rank waiting for activity. There is no active play yet, so actually white is better here, I think. Black played queen to a5, and I took my time to think about this, because he's getting his queen out of this d file. That means that he's planning to eventually take on e4, or perhaps to play knight to c6, and after moving the bishop plays a rook on the d file. I decided to take now on d5. E takes d5, and he played bishop to f5. So I've won a pawn there on d5, and if I can keep that pawn and trade the heavy pieces, I will have a very strong pass pawn. So at this point it was a matter of thinking, actually shifting in my plans. I was not longer thinking about attacking on the king side. I was now thinking about how can I trade pieces so I can simplify the position towards one endgame. And I decided to play g4 to more or less force that bishop to take on c2, because I don't think that this bishop is going backward to d7 or c8. He took indeed on c2, and I retook with the king. I may not take with the queen because then e3 hangs my bishop, and here he played a very slow move, and I think this is just fatal. a6. The idea is to play b5 and b4, but this is too slow. Let's move back, because if imagine that this knight on f6 would not be there, then black could play bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, queen takes queen, b takes c3, and then rook takes e3. Again, if this knight is still there, bishop takes e3, I cannot take with the b pawn because then queen takes a2. So I have to take with the queen. Queen trade, and then the bishop on e3 is undefended. This means that with black, black needs to try to move that knight away from f6 in a way that he wins something. So now with all these hints, you probably see that the move that can be done here is knight takes g4. he could regain the pawn this way. I didn't see it when I took on d5, and also not when I played g4. Actually, only now in the analysis after the game I saw that he had this possibility. After f takes g4, then he can execute the idea of taking here and then trading the queen and then taken on e3. And this endgame looks better for white, but it's not won. It still needs to be played, and well, black needs to get his pieces out and see if he can create some threats. Perhaps placing a rook on c8 would be handy to attack this c3 pawn. Well, I can play c4 actually, or perhaps d6 immediately. d6, and well, then he must play knight d7 to stop that pawn. I have bishop b5 or bishop g2. Both strong moves, because this check doesn't matter because of rook to d2. Yeah, white is better, but it's not that clearly won. Let's return to the game. He played a6, and now I advanced this pawn to g5 with my idea is to, after this knight moves away from here, I can play bishop to d4 and trade the dark square bishops, because this is a very strong weapon in the King's Indian, and also in this position where this diagonal is completely open. He played knight to h5, bishop d4, knight d7, finally developing his pieces on the queen side. Now I took the bishop on g7, he took back with the knight, and now I went with my king to b1 because I don't want to be bothered with these moves like rook to c8 and b5, b4, so king b1, safety. Also this opens the possibility of moving this knight to e4 without a2 hanging. Knight to f5 was played now, and I played knight to e4. The interesting thing here is that it's very difficult for black not to trade queens, because it's not clear where should this queen go. Queen a4, perhaps. Then I have bishop h3, and if this knight moves away, the other knight falls because I take, queen takes, and the knight f6 is a fork. So it's difficult for black. Perhaps queen to c7 or queen to d8 is an idea. Well, still this idea of bishop h3 is very strong. I'm threatening to take here, and he cannot really prevent it. Rook e5, then oh wait, rook e5, is that an idea? I cannot play f4 because the knight hangs. Okay, so this could be a way of preventing this. I could play rook h to e1, now threatening f4, and that's not possible to stop for him. Yeah, so this gives me the let's say b5, f4, and now rook, where if he goes back, then I take on f5, and then knight f6 check. Yeah, knight f6 check is very strong. If he takes, then I have this g7 point where I can try to checkmate him using the g file. So this is a very strong attack for white. If he moves the king, I simply take the rook and I take the knight, and well, I think his king is very exposed. Let's see what happens if we play this. Yeah, then d6 and then rook e1 and rook e7. Yeah, this is one for white, I think. Okay, let's go back to the game. Like that, fast backwards. He took the queen. That's what my opponent did. Of course, I retook with the rook. He played a knight to e3, and now the move that we have seen in the other variations, bishop h3. Now there is not much to do for black. If he defends the knight with the rook, I trade it and then I give a check on f6, winning material. He played this and then I took. He went with his king to g7. Now I'm a piece up and a pawn. It's not very exciting anymore. But he continued playing. I played knight f6. He played b5. Now I played b3 to take away the square c4 for this knight. So I'm threatening rook h to e1. And then he's forced to go with this knight to f5, where I can trade it from a bishop. That's what happened in the game. Rook a7, rook e1, knight f5, bishop takes, g takes, and now d6. This pawn is advancing and cannot be stopped. King to g6 was played now. I played f4, he played h6, I played h4, now he played h5. He's constructing a kind of stalemate construction here, but it's not going to be stalemate. d7, a5, rook e8, rook a8, rook d to e2, now a4. I played b4, he played a3. It looks like he's trying to stalemate himself, but I have now rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and rook e8. And now it's all over. And the last move is actually quite funny, because here he took the pawn, and I wanted to play knight takes d7, and then before I did it I said, wait a minute, I have a checkmate. Checkmating one. Boom. Over. This was today's game. This time a happy game for me. I hope that more victories will follow, and I'm sure so now and then also a defeat will be there. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.